So migration is a movement of alleles between populations, the continent and the island here. And as you can see, the island is much smaller than the continent, will contain less organisms, therefore less alleles. So the continent would have a much bigger effect on the island because it is contributing more, and of course the island wouldn't have as much effect on the big continent. So just want to go over genetic flow, also known as gene migration or allele flow, is a transfer of alleles, genetic variation from one population to another population through migration. So with migration, you have immigration, which are new organisms join a population, which will bring in new alleles and change frequencies. Where immigration, a proportion of the population leaves, taking their genes with them. And so, like for example, immigration, you have it would be like the species from the continent went to the island and would like join that whole population and create a bunch of and bring in a bunch of different types of new alleles. So just want to go over big P is the frequency of allele in the donor population, which is like from the continent, and M equals a portion of migrants after immigration occurred. And so like here, like if you have initially 255 individuals and 45 migrate in, M is going to be the immigrants over total to be like 15%. So little p is the frequency of the big allele on the island initially, and then 1 minus M is probability that the parent will come from the island, and be like equals a portion of the total population after migration that was from the island. So P prime is the frequency of the allele after migration. So, like for my example, so 300 new immigrants joined the 1,000 island native. So the total population now, 1,000 plus 300 equals 1,300. So we would do what we have new over the total, and so 23% of the population, so that would be our M. And so after migration has occurred, 23.07% of the population are immigrants, and that means that 73.9% were already from the island. And so the island get immigrants from the continent at a 23.0% rate of the total population per generation. So if we had 300 new immigrants from so percentage again, so the genotypes are big B, little b, and little b. So for the first one, we're trying to figure out the frequency of the big B in the mainland, and it turns out to be 0.65. To get this number, we look at the number of big B alleles, so 5,000, and multiply it by 2 because there are 2 alleles, which equal 10,000. And so we look at the big B, little b part, and we multiply that by 2 because of the 2 alleles, and we divide it by 2 because we only need the big B from it. So it's the same number. And so last we take the total and multiply it by 2 because 2,000, so we would get 20,000, so it's 10,000 plus 3,000 equals 13,000, divide that by 20,000, and that's how we get our 65%. And for the second, we want to know the frequency of big B initially on the island, and it would be 0.33%. And we do the same thing, we take 60, multiply it by 2, add the 540 divided by 2,000, which is 2 times total, and you get 0.33. And this is the percent that would be the little b. So genotypic array, for the genotypic array of the continent population, we would have 5,000 out of 10,000, which would equal 0.5, 3,000 out of 10,000, which is 0.3, and then 2,000 out of 10,000, 0.2. And so for the genotypic array of the island, initially we would have 60 out of 1,000, which is 0.06. For big B, 540 out of 1,000, which is 0.54, and 400 out of 1,000, which is 0.40. So looking at this, we see that there were 50% pink, 30% purple, 20% blue, and 6% pink, 54% purple, and 40% blue. So after migration, this is the equation we're going to use. So after migration, allele frequencies, continent population. So the population of the continent is going to bring all over its big B alleles and change that frequency on the island. There will be a lot more pink on the island, and we can see that started out with 65% big B and 35% little b on the continent, and 33% big B and 67% little b on the island. These calculations give us the frequency of the big B and the little b alleles on the island, and now there are 40% B and 59% little b. Initially, the island had 3% pink, 54% purple, and 40% blue. And now, after migration, we use these calculations here, and we find out we have 14% pink, 48% purple, and 35% blue. Migration genetically linked the populations together, and the allele frequencies will be more homogeneous after populations. So for Hardy-Weinberg is the ideal state that provides a baseline to measure gene evolution within a population. Here, P represents the dominant alleles, and Q represents a recessive allele frequency. So here we do 60 times 2, which is 120, plus the 540, and so that's 660 divided by 2,000, a total by 2. So here now we have 0.3 for P, and for the big B, we do the same thing, and we have 0.67 for Q. We plug it into the equation and get the expected frequencies of the population.